Welcome to another episode of Behind the Chalkboard. You're probably thinking, where's Dan and his beautiful face? He is here, but we like. Good morning, yeah. It is morning. It's an early one this morning, isn't it?
It is.
It's only been about, 12 hours since I saw you last?
Yeah.
So,
in again, mate. In again.
In again, always. Introduction to our guest.
Yeah, we've got another great guest on this morning. Joe, welcome.
Morning, how are we doing?
Very well, thank you, mate. Look, before we get into the world of education, which I know you're involved in, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and which business you represent.
Okay, so I'm from Hobson Porter. We're a multidisciplinary construction contractor based out of Hull, working across Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. And we've been in the education sector now for over 50 years. Our business was established in 1971. And we've got a really strong track record behind us of a whole range of education projects, from small refurbs through to 12-13 million pound new builds. So pleased to be here, and thanks for having me.
No problem. How far did you travel this morning?
I came up from North Lincolnshire.
Lincolnshire, yeah. Right, okay. So a lot of your work out that way then, North Lincolnshire, Hull?
Yeah, as I say, we've principally been a Humberside business, right, for most of our history. Certainly in the last 15 years, we've branched out a little bit. Certainly in the last 5 or 6 years, we've probably pushed the boundaries more than we ever have. So at the moment, our education portfolio is stretched from Skegness, and we handed over a school in North Allerton last year. So they're probably the two extremes. Anything over to the Pennines, really. So it's the whole of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire is really what we cover. And as I say, the diversity of projects in that is massive from an education perspective.
Yeah, it's been it's a bit of a different angle today. You're our first guest on this entire podcast from a...
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Main contractor.
Yeah.
It's cheap, but it's nice because when we created this podcast, it was to get the business side, but as we're interviewing more people, whether it's estate managers or CEOs, we're finding that the whole supply chain is all part of that. It isn't just them, and
their experiences too, isn't it? Really, it's sort of not just school facing out. It's all the backlog behind it, really, and then all the back work in reality.
It is.
So I suppose just putting a bit of context for anyone on listening, it's trying to get the understanding from a contractor's point of view, how you see things moving forward, and the things that you've got to do as a contractor to try and provide what social value, and I suppose the context of what's all the deliverables that you've done all these projects, and range from new schools down to just minor works. It's not just a matter of winning a tender and getting approved and being used in a job, is it? It's sort of all the infrastructure and the relationship building with schools to try and deliver the best product and best projects you can. So do you have a typical, so let's start with it, do you have like a typical job that you can think of where it turned slightly from just pricing up jobs and sort of trying to add value and a bit more social value into the school projects you were doing?
Yeah, there's a definite turning point for us, and that was back probably about 10 years ago. But no, more than that, I'd say 12 years ago. We've always prided ourselves on our approach to CSR and latterly sort of social value and ESG. But I think the turning point for us, we were doing a job at Bishop Burton College in East Riding of Yorkshire, probably about 2012, 2013. And it was the construction of a new building for construction-related career topics. Mm-hmm. So it was predominantly for brickwork and plastering courses. And one of the directors of our business, Dave Blades, who's kind of the spearhead of our foundations program, which I'll touch on shortly, but he saw a real opportunity there to add value to the curriculum of the students whilst we were on site building the asset. So we had loads of student engagement in that build, really sort of enhanced what they were doing. We got suppliers and material manufacturers to come in and deliver student-friendly CPDs, dozens and dozens of site visits during the build. And it really sort of sparked an opportunity for us to look at how we can do more of that type of thing. So we kind of were doing it before we were asked. That wasn't a job where we had to demonstrate a plan at tender stage and deliver it in construction. It was something that we just saw an opportunity to do the right and the moral thing to give the students the best experience while we were there. So that kind of spearheaded our foundations program. In 2016, once that building was fully operational and complete, and had been for a couple of years, we ran our first Foundations Live project, which was a one-day student exhibition, basically. So we got a number of key players from that project and from our supply chain, came in, took over the building, had various stalls and interactive displays and similar to bring the students in and let them experience construction firsthand. And then it just, from there, it absolutely ballooned. Foundations Live now, we're getting over 1,000 people through the door every year. We had to move, in the second year, we had to move to the Equine Arena at Bishop Burton and take that over because we were just massively outgrown in year one. And now we don't just deal with students at the college studying construction. We've got primary school children, we've got secondary school learners, we've got loads of colleges from around the region, and we've also looked at adult retraining as well. So for us, it's been kind of an organic growth that came from a light bulb moment on that one job. But it came at a time when social value started to be on the agenda. Yeah. So for us, when we were tendering works, in the early days of social value coming into tenders, it was quite qualitative. So it was, explain what you can do, explain what you've done. And of course, we had some great points of reference for that. I think the most tricky or the most sort of biggest step change in social value has been it's moved from, words and descriptions to a bit of science and a bit of, it's all monetary. There's a big framework behind that now to demonstrate the value of your social value. So, yeah, we had a great starting point, and I think we're all on that journey. And we're increasingly finding now a lot of the work that we're bidding. We're putting forward plans that are incredibly robust. It's all in pound notes and not just in words. And if we get into contract on any of those jobs, we're using third-party interfaces with various portals and similar to go on deliver a social value plan. So, yeah, I think for us it's been over 10 years of evolution, and it's still going. And I still think there's a long way to go. Yeah. To be honest, I think there's an awful long way to go. I think it's exciting, I think I can see how some people in the industry, it's been a really short, sharp pain to evolve and adapt. But I say for us, we were quite privileged because we had that initial light bulb moment where we did it for the right and the moral reasons rather than we were asked. So yeah, I think that's probably the one moment in time that I would pin as a change.
Great question. It was a great question. I love that.
It took a while to get out.
It took a while to get out. I thought it was going to be a question. But it was, I think what's great though about the business is you didn't wait to react, and that's what a lot of businesses are doing now. You're almost positioned yourself very strongly where businesses may need to lean into you to get their social value. And I think having that is amazing. I interviewed the guys from Constructive Futures yesterday, so whenever this goes out, this will go after that. So if you watch the last episode, you'll see what they were speaking about. But Jenny and Natalie from Constructive Futures giving the stats of where we're at, 238,000 down on construction workers. So it must feel like you're doing mammoth tasks, yet it feels like it's almost that feeling, innit, of spading water back into the sea. And you need a lot more employers. You're a standout, absolutely, but you need everyone to be replicating what you're doing. And there's enough students to do it. There is. And even though you've got such a charge and lead on it, you almost created a blueprint, I think, for people to go, let's mirror this. So that's kind of, how I see it. But yeah, what's your thoughts on lack of people getting into construction in general?
There's a few facets to this. It's an evident problem that's, despite our best endeavours, it's probably to some extent getting worse. We've certainly seen, and one of the drivers for us launching our foundations programme was we've seen far too many fantastic subcontractors cease to exist, not because they've gone out of business, because they've had no succession planning. Because they've served us for 20, 30, 40, even 50 years in some cases, and the owners and the original founders have retired and the business has ceased trading, and we've lost a fantastic subcontractor in that. We've seen that countless times. I think one of the challenges we have is it's great that main contractors are being asked to deliver social value. It's great that, a number of contractors are taking great strides towards delivering social value. But I strongly believe that those that are most in need of the skills are worst placed to do anything about it. So, we're quite privileged. We've got 120 staff. We have people in the business that can dedicate time and resource to social value endeavours. We can set up purpose programs. We obviously have to do social value as part of our public sector tenders now. We find that youngsters that are considering construction naturally flock to main contractors. Okay, be that contractors of a similar size to ourselves, as a sort of local, regional, through to tier ones, and everything in between. Actually, the vast majority of the people that need them new entrants are in the supply chain, and they're SMEs or micro SMEs, and they don't have the resource, they don't have the manpower to be able to go to all these careers fairs, have a presence, and have an ability to, and they're not, in a lot of cases, they're not being asked to deliver social value. So for us, it's about signposting. I think we've all got a responsibility as main contractors to fly the flag for construction and entice youngsters into our sector. But we also need to be showing them the depth and the breadth and signposting them to where those jobs and those apprenticeships and similar actually are. We take on apprentices, but it's absolutely scratching the surface, the numbers that we take on, as Hobson Porter compared to what our supply chain can offer. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we've seen is having that ability to support the supply chain when it comes to skills.
I've got a great idea.
Go on.
Already.
Go on.
So, have you, as Hobson Porter, looked at a way then that you as the beacon to draw in these people, is there a way that you could, like a football team, a Chelsea or a big team, loan out your new young apprenticeship scholars out to like your named or approved subcontractors to fill voids for such roles, just for training, like a secondment? Has that ever been looked at? Or
I think it has been tried. The sort of shared apprenticeship schemes. I think EN Futures are still running one and have certainly done it for as long as I can remember. So probably 10 years, maybe more. They've had a shared apprenticeship scheme. I think they're quite intense from a resource and administration point of view, obviously. But I don't think the idea is a bad one, and I think it could be massively utilised more. I think for me, the opportunity really is being able to signpost and feed people. As I say, if subcontractors aren't out there fishing for these because they haven't got the time, a lot of these companies are still run by and owned by people who are on the tools. So they don't have the time to do this. So I think we've talked about it. How do we set up almost an academy type approach? Where we can be a beacon, be out there in the market, almost do to some extent a sift. We could run some almost initial competency based programs where we can identify potential talent and people that are genuinely looking for careers in construction, and then feed that into our supply chain and almost do the first stage for them. I think that would be a massive help.
I've thought about something like this before, where you have the amount of students that leave school now, and we've seen it, haven't we? Even with building surveying, they're just in just out in space looking for somewhere to drop into. There's nowhere for them to drop into unless they get caught up in the big ones that take on 10,000 a year. The rest of them just get pushed into space, and then they're just floating, and they're looking for that placement. But then you'll get a smaller practice that doesn't have the resource to look after them, and it's that middle ground. And I always thought, imagine you could go on a database almost where it's like, this guy's, he is called Joe Booth. He's studying bricklaying. He's 19 years old, based in this location. Here's a profile picture, and almost you're giving then a contractor, they look all right. Problem is, I was pushed back on this idea because it's to do with prejudging people prior to seeing them. So it wasn't allowed. It's like you can't judge somebody based on what they look like. And it's little things like that it makes it then a lot trickier, doesn't it? And it is a thing. It absolutely is a thing, prejudging. But then it just makes the challenge even bigger. Is then how do we pull these people?
Yeah, it's really difficult because I find you go to careers fairs, and I've done a number of them myself. We're really blessed. We've got a team of our foundation's ambassadors in our business. Probably got 20 members of staff that voluntarily give up their time to support all the events that we do. And I've been to a few myself, but I find myself going yes but no a lot. Yeah. So we have welding students, for example, come forward and they say, "Oh, Hobson Porter, you guys do steel frame buildings, do you?" "Yes." "Have you got any apprenticeships?" "No." We don't take on steelwork apprentices. It's just and fabrication. It's something that we source in the supply chain. So it's and we do direct them, and we do give them names of organisations they maybe want to consider speaking to. But time and time again, we go to a number of colleges in the region. You go to these careers fairs. There's a whole range of organisations from different industries there. You look around, the military's there, the NHS is there, and in many cases, there's a number of people for construction, but they're always tier 1 or tier 2 contractors, and very rarely do you see people from the supply chain side. And I think that's that's not a criticism of them. I completely understand why they don't have the resource to do it, but I think we have a responsibility to help them and support them in that.
It was quite interesting. It's interesting when you look at how York College, for argument's sake, they're very. Sue, who comes on, is very vocal about the apprenticeship routes and a lot and the experience that you have, and making sure they've got minimum hours in practice or in practical sort of situations. But I don't think there's enough at times. I think no matter how much, you can always do more because it is that filling that gap over the 1, 2, 3 years or whatever time they do on their on the qualifications, that it's still probably best served in a company or in a business that's doing the day-to-day tasks, because it's you could be a joiner and you can stand at a woodwork bench all day long, but it's all the other sort of in instances where you're on site or you're in a situation where it's not just looking at the woodwork, it's all the things that go alongside it, like the bricklayers need to do this or the electricians in here doing that. And I think if they had more access to that and sort of been thrown in at the deep end a little bit rather than softly, then it might encourage more to be in that trade or in that, because a lot of time they get a taste of it and it's like, oh, it's not what I want it to be, and they drop off. Similar in building surveying, it's remarkable how many start on the first year of the degree, but within weeks have dropped off. And I'm sure that goes for all different degrees, because it's not to their liking, it's not they've got a personal reason to change it. But it's sort of how do you retain that interest and motivation to do it, I guess.
It is difficult, and I think the context and the interfaces, as you say, I think. And I'm not by any stretch sort of criticising full-time courses, but I know personally, sort of from family life, an example of an individual who went for a full-time bricklaying course. Incredibly skilled bricklayer, came out of it and struggled to get a job. And you think, oh, hang on, we know the challenges, we know the shortages. How can we struggle? How can you struggle to get a job? And fundamentally, it was because of the lack of context of how it actually works in industry. So one thing he hadn't been properly exposed to was the speed. The skill was there, but the speed wasn't. So when he was looking for site experience, it was labouring at best. He wasn't really getting on the tools properly and managing to take forward his skills and adapt them to the speed of delivery. And despite doing a 2 or 3 year full-time bricklaying course, he ended up going back to the beginning, and he's now doing a quantity surveying apprenticeship.
Wow!
For a utilities contractor.
So we lost that skill.
Lost the skill.
That's one example, isn't it?
Just one example.
So imagine how many of them are happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think any opportunity to give learners who are already on a construction career path, and that's just one. I mean, getting young people to consider a construction career path is a whole challenge in itself. But when they're actually there, when you've got that hook and you've got somebody considering or already embarking on a construction career path, how do we give them that next stage to go, like you say, that transition from education to industry, irrespective of skill, is absolutely massive. There's a huge gulf there, and it's a really difficult bridge for us all to, and I think that's why apprenticeships in our sector are particularly prevalent, because it does give them that context, and it gives them that sort of interface experience. We've always prided ourselves when we have got CPDs in colleges and similar. Yes, it might be a college that's teaching students how to do brickwork and plastering, and you get a window manufacturer coming in and doing a CPD, and it's like, well, that's not my core subject area. Well, actually, it is, because you need to understand how your work interfaces with theirs and the considerations you need to have. And I think it's just that exposure. It's a very, very difficult bridge, but I think I don't think it's impossible. And I think obviously, apprenticeships have had quite a shot in the arm in recent years, which is great. But I say it's very difficult. I think there's still inexcusable failure rate in many parts, like you say, with people either starting courses and not sticking with them, or completing courses and still not successfully going from education to industry.
Yeah.
They always have view.
No, mate, keep this going.
I think they always have view. It's like, one, you get a degree and you've just got that level of, and this is higher education, obviously, but you've got that level that you've gone through the process, you've done a dissertation. But I think more focus has to be on the courses that they've got a degree in, rather than just, I've got.
It's like entitlement, innit? I've got a degree and I now should open up 100 doors, and yet you can't even open up one.
Yeah.
And it's like, life experience is so crucial.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
I remember, even, and this is obviously at degree level, is that you do a sandwich placement in your third year, and it's just so, it's eye-opening. You go from year 2, and this is 20 years old, thinking everything, and you just don't know anything. Yeah. And then you have this year in industry, like, wow, that's actually what the job is and what's entailed and things. And I wish I'd maybe had 2 years doing that, and then having a year doing your final exams. And I think that can be brought earlier. I think 14, 15, 16, there should be some sort of exposure to certain industries.
That's where we're lacking. That goes back to what you said, is it? There's no resources at all. You've got people at the top end. But the thing is, if you look at like what you've created here, your goal as a business was to build buildings. Mm-hmm. That was what Hobson Porter do. Mm-hmm. But you've opened up a can of worms, not as a bad thing. You've opened up a whole new world that you would thought this was never part of it, but you're now getting dragged into it, but in a really, really positive way, and it's probably becoming a big chunk of your business. But that took a lot to happen, and you're not going to get them middle SMEs taking that risk because they don't need to.
Yeah.
So what's the point in going, do you know what? We'll just do the building. And I said this to the guys yesterday. It's like, imagine everyone just stopped because we couldn't be bothered, and who'd do it? So it takes some brave people, though, to put your head above the parapet and say, we want to help.
I think a couple of points there. I mean, I think we all have to. I don't think we've got a choice. We've always said that, and my personal belief is this skills shortage that is been there for ages and continues to be there. There isn't one organisation that can tackle this. The greatest respect to CITB and all the other, central government bodies that are trying to tackle this. It cannot be solved by one organisation. There's no one contractor in the UK that's big enough to tackle this head on. We've got, and this is one of the challenges we face. Construction is like many industries, but particularly competitive. The number of events you go to, pre-tender briefings and similar, where you're in a room with your competitive peers, and any questions, and we all go silent. It's like, don't give anything away. Don't say a word. Don't say a word, because you might
show the weakness.
Yeah, you might give away a competitive edge for this commodity service that we're all providing anyway. But so we are fiercely competitive. But being honest, we have to stop when it comes to this. When it comes to solving the skills challenges, we've got to collaborate better. We've got to have it's a sum of the parts. We've got to, and this is why Foundations Live, I think for the first 3 or 4 years, despite our best endeavours, it was like, that's a Hobson and Porter event, and some of our subbies came and supported it, and others that didn't work for us didn't, and we got none of our competitors, despite trying our best there. We last year we probably had 6, 7, 8 other main contractors at our event. And it's not, I say our event, it's Foundations. It's not Hobson Porter, it's Foundations Live. And the more we can do that, and break down those barriers, I think you mentioned earlier, Dan, about, other people piggybacking on what you've done. For us, it's not about that. We know, and there was actually a light bulb moment for us a few years ago. We've been running Foundations Live for 7 or 8 years out of goodwill, right? And never once during that period have we said, we need to do this, this and this so we meet that benchmark. We've never done it. And we've had competitors attend Foundations Live who said to us, this is great because it counts towards one of our workshops on our benchmarks we've got to meet. And I sat there thinking, we've never ever put this forward for any of our own benchmarks, yet we've got other people coming in and using it for theirs. And that's great. Like, it is great. But actually we've created a forum, and it's grown itself. I'm not going to say that we are fantastic and we're brilliant. What we've done is fantastic, but it's something that has grown itself because it was needed.
Yeah.
And say the more people can come and collaborate with us, the better. The door's open to everyone. It's an event for construction skills in Yorkshire. It is not a Hobson Porter event. And I think we need more stuff like that. We need to break down these competitive walls that we refuse to talk to one another in certain contexts, because without collaborating, we'll never ever solve this skills shortage.
We hate when we like our competitors' stuff, don't we? So it's right funny over the year, and it's I think it's just the nature of the world that we're in, because we all want to, everyone wants to fight for their work, but actually there's a much bigger problem, and there's enough work out there for everyone anyway. You
are a cavalier when it comes to cheerleading everybody.
I cheerlead everybody. I really do. Even when I was working for you, I'd be cheerleading other surveyors. Yeah. And it's not because it's just, I feel like I'm very under the impression that there is enough work for everybody. 100%. And we have this major issue anyway of contractors going bust because they're taking jobs on at ridiculous prices. This is obviously a complete different thing. Race to the bottom. We have got, this pandemic with suicide in construction. It's this whole different world over here. Here, and it was, I spoke about this yesterday, over here it's like everyone get into construction, and over here you've got, this is an awful place to be. And it's like, I couldn't believe it that we're trying to bring the two together, yet there's this really weird piece in the middle, and there's so much to be done on here. It's not about winning jobs as much as it is, because that's quite naive of me to say that. We have to win jobs for the businesses to keep functioning, but you can be smart about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said that we still have a massive image problem, a huge image problem for bringing young people, not just into our sector, but even to consider our sector. And there's a few reasons for that. I think we aren't. There's great efforts happening, but I don't think we're there yet in terms of promoting the breadth and depth of the industry. I think Go Construct CITB at the moment, they're saying there's over 200 career paths in construction. I can well believe it, and I think there's probably more. But we don't push that enough. We don't show that breadth and depth. I think we're guilty of. The first thing we do in any contractor on any site, and for the right reasons, for health and safety, we throw up a boundary fence around the site. And it feels sometimes that from a careers perspective, that's almost what the industry feels like. It's like, unless you're in it, you can't really see the breadth and depth. You don't really understand all those different options available to you. And there's still that age-old problem where people go, I don't want to be a builder. And, it's not about being a builder. There's so much more to it. And I think, I'm guilty of it. So the number of people that get into this sector because they've got family ties to it, or the second, third, fourth, fifth generation, because they've had that exposure. And go back to what you said about, having 2 years, in your sandwich year rather than one. I think that's a great idea, because that exposure, seeing it firsthand and seeing the breadth and depth is really key. And if you actually, I speak to people all the time, and you realise that so many of them have had a link to construction, seen it before, and even my own career was quite now got to exactly where I wanted to be, but I had a degree in marketing, right? So I had a bit of a ding dong with my old man, to be honest, when I was doing my A levels, because he's an engineer, so he was in the Merchant Navy, mechanical engineer for years. Came ashore, went into sort of plant and hydraulics, and ended up working for Balfour's, running their crawler crane hire fleet. And that was kind of my exposure to construction. You know, when I was 8 or 9 years old, I was driving crawler cranes off ships at Southampton and sort of thing. You know, I got loads of photos as a kid, and I saw the sector really early and loved it and fell in love with it. So I went through the typical, I need to go into a civil engineering type arrangement. Came to do my A-levels, did the typical sort of maths, physics route, and I just wasn't inspired. And there's a lot, you know, going up what you were saying earlier about influence, you know, there's a lot going on in your life at that point in time. There's an awful lot, you know, it's a really, that 2-year period when you leave school, you know, you start driving, you start drinking, you start going out, you know, there's all sorts of social pressures, but there's also, it's a really, really pivotal point in your career. And I remember getting to the end of the year one of A-levels and saying, I'm not feeling this. I'm not feeling this maths and physics engineering route. Or you never get in construction. I said, well, I think there's another way. Well, how do you suppose you're going to do that? And I said, you know, the thing that really gets me excited, the subject I'm enjoying, is the sort of business studies, economics end of things. I said, I love that sort of approach where it's, you know, it's not quite as scientific, and, you know, you can use reasoning and rationale, and some things are subjective. That's where I see myself. And, you know, I remember having quite a few heated debates. So that'll never work. And I said, well, you know, that's the end of town I want to go in at. Not necessarily just marketing, but you know, the business development sales side. Albeit there's not many, if any, degrees in that subject topic area. So the nearest thing was marketing. So I went on a marketing degree. I did the gap year with a full intent of trying to get into construction and engineering. And I went to the steelworks at Scunthorpe, working for Chorus, which is now Tata Steel. And that was the absolute game changer for me, because, you know, even the first 2 years of uni, I knew what I wanted to do. But as soon as you get into industry, as soon as you see it firsthand, that for me was an absolute game changing moment. And from that point, never really looked back. And now, you know, speaking to my dad, he will admit that, you know, I found a path that was very unique to me. But what I wanted to do, you know, ultimately I wanted to get into management and leadership in construction, and that's where I've ended up, by a very unorthodox route.
Do you know what? That is the perfect example of how you can get in, but how hard it is for people to see that. My route in was through a builder's merchant, like through literally stacking bricks in a yard. Yeah. And I never thought that was ever a route in. I never knew what I wanted to do. And that was it. When I'm seeing builders coming in the yard, picking up timber, cement, sand, I was in. Yeah. And I've never left. But it's a really, really interesting. So there's no cost for that. There's no cost on business development, sales, leadership. There is in leadership, but such a route that almost like, no, unless you tell people that route, then they're never going to know that.
Were there any triggers to find that route, or was it just solely down to yourself to sort of research and sort of pick?
It was research, but I think it was being honest with myself about where was I progressing most with the least effort, being completely honest. You know, at the end of that first year, and I'm looking at, you know, maths and physics was really hard, really, really hard, as they are at A-levels. And I knew I could probably do it. I could get to where I needed to be, but I wasn't particularly enjoying it, and I was having to put so much effort into doing it. Whereas I was sort of I was focusing on those, yet still doing business studies and economics in the background without any real, or comparatively with a lot less effort, but a lot more success. And I just had an honest conversation with myself about what is your skill set, where does it lie, and that's how I sort of came to that conclusion. And I think, again, it's perception. You know, I think my dad honestly thought that marketing, oh great, you're going to design Mars bar wrappers for a living, good luck to you. You know, I think I think that was kind of what. You know, again, it comes to perception and evolution. You know, I think, you know, a lot of these roles probably didn't exist 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So the world's a different place. And I think you got to be able to resonate with youngsters and show them and put, using layman terms, and put things in their world. I mean, we had an architect at our Foundations Live event a few years ago. And I overheard him when I was stood talking to somebody else, and some students went up to his stand and they literally said, "What's an architect?" Yeah. And he said, "Minecraft for adults."
There you go.
And the moment he said that, yeah, that was it. They were engaged because he made a direct link to their world.
Clever, yeah, I like that.
Rather than saying, I build buildings, they've switched off after that first two lines, haven't they?
Yeah, and I think increasingly, digitalised construction, there's going to be so much more of that going forward. And again, I just don't think people see it. I don't think they see that that opportunity in construction. And I still think, you mentioned about contractors going bust, there's still this wrong perception that this industry is more risky than any other. Yeah. Again, sorry to sort of keep giving personal stories, but a friend of mine currently works in the utilities sector. Okay, he works in a management role in a utilities contracting business who has one client on one framework. Okay, so I think they're probably halfway through this framework. He got approached for a job working for an established contract that's been going for 150 years plus. Okay, brilliant job. Work-life balance for him would have been infinitely better than what he had. He was, spending so much time on the road, away from his young family. A really good opportunity for him, to be honest. And when he sort of started having the conversations with his extended family about considering this opportunity, he was met with, construction. They're always laying people off. Do you really want to get into that? Now, two things there is, one, that perception is incorrect, and two, he was already in construction. When you actually throw a ring round the sector, he was it was infrastructure contracting, but he was already in construction. So I think there's still we have an image problem, and we have a perception problem, but we also have a lack of knowledge around what construction looks like beyond that boundary fence. What are those jobs, and how diverse can it be? And I think we just need to sell ourselves so much better in that regard. It's
also personal input as well, isn't it, from parents and grandparents and family members around the image and perception of construction. It's, stories. I think my dad's always told me a story that his dad, my granddad's, so he was a plumber, really skilled plumber, and my dad wanted to go into plumbing, and he laughed at him, said, "No, you don't be doing that. You want to go into printing," and forced him to go into printing, which was the big thing then. But then, everything digitised, and all these another sort of sector just washed away. But he would have probably had a lot more success in life being a plumber, because it's the longevity of these skill sets are long into decades of expertise, isn't it? So
we've learned so much over these years. I've been in it for years, since I was left school, 19, 18, and
11, 12.
For years, through buildings merchant, you don't feel it. It's not until I've kind of got a bit older, and then you're looking back, and then you're speaking to schools, and you're speaking to construction companies, and you hear the noise, and you're involved in it, and then you realise, wow, there's so much to do. But I guess this is what these podcasts are for, aren't they? This whole thing we've got going on at the moment is to understand, the world of education and what's going on behind the scenes. And some of the stories we're hearing, though, there's some really amazing leaders in these schools, isn't there?
There really is.
I've never felt more confident that these are the people that can shift that dynamic from just being a school to churning out kids to go. I was one of them, and sure you were back in day. I remember walking out with my GCSEs, I'm like, now what? Didn't get anyone coming up to me to say, do you want to do T-levels? Didn't get anybody to say, do you want to do this? It was almost like you had to decide. I'm 15 years old, walking out school with my backpack on, going, right, best go to McDonald's. Yeah. Still the greatest job in the world, by the way.
Careers advice was in the library.
It was in the library.
I didn't go in the library.
Yeah.
That was not cool to go in the library, was it? So it's sort of, it's that change that perception. But I think look at the colleges now and the sort of career fairs, that'd been amazing. Just go get the free pencils. You know what I mean? Sort of things, free pencil cases. But it's, I think we're talking 20 years ago, 30 years ago that we went through that process. But it is, I think you say there's so much interaction that probably isn't publicised enough.
Yeah.
And in the spotlight, because this podcast shows that there's so much good being done and so much hard work, not just in the minorities, across the whole thing.
But just finally, I just want to talk about the the event that you do just a little bit more
definitely.
on that, because that's something really good. And what does the day look like, and how is it set up, and how can people get involved?
Okay, so as I say, we've been running it. This will be our 9th year. The 9th calendar year. We lost a couple of years due to COVID, obviously. We structure it around 4 pillars, and I think these are really important when it comes to construction skills. Yes, the event started principally to enhance the career paths of learners who had already embarked on a construction career. Okay, and there's so much opportunity there, and that's how our foundations journey started. I mentioned at the start, working with students on a live site to give them more context and experience whilst they're learning brickwork and joinery and plastering. That's just one of the 4. If you go right to the front, we have primary schools coming into the event. Now, obviously, from a safeguarding perspective, those numbers are relatively small in comparison to some of the others. But I think we have to, as an industry, do as much as we can to just plant a seed of the sector of construction and how exciting that can be. It doesn't need to be much more than that. I strongly and firmly believe there's no other career path where you can physically change the horizon and the skyline of the local town, village, city, wherever you live, for generations to come. So we need to plant that seed at primary school age, and we do bring primary schools in to the event in small numbers, where they do mock bricklaying with little wooden blocks, and we have some mortar made up of sand and fairy liquid and similar, and they do some hands-on experience and some sort of task based on almost like a Duplo bricks, like house build arrangement. So that's pillar 1. Primary schools, just plant the seed, tell them what is construction. Secondary school age is probably where we get the greatest numbers. I think we've had upwards of sort of 800-900 students from secondary schools across the region attend. I think that's a critically important one, because they've probably heard of construction. They haven't seen the breadth and depth. These learners of that age are making subject choice, curriculum choices that will influence their future careers. So we need to try and get in before that if we can, and say, look, if you're looking at construction, here's a few subjects you may want to consider for your GCSEs. Not that you can't turn back or adapt later, but it's a consideration. I just think we need to. We've had some great strides in that particular peer group. The third one being the people who are already on a construction career path, and that's all about enhancing their experience and their learning. And the fourth one being adult retraining. How can we pull people from other sectors into construction, be that ex-military, which is a natural progression in many cases, and there's loads of fantastic case studies of where that's working and has worked, but also where we've got sectors in decline, retail, class example. What can we do as an industry to try and get people looking at construction as their potential next industry if they're struggling in the one that they're in now. So they're the 4 pillars we run with. The event that we run usually around sort of just before half term in the autumn. I think this year's date is 17th of October at Bishop Burton. We're in the process of updating the website ready for this year, but you can still go online on foundationslive.co.uk. You can see all the videos and content from previous years on there. It really is a sum of the parts. Any organisation that's willing to collaborate with us, come and exhibit. We don't charge; it's completely free. This is goodwill from everybody. Bring it together, collaborate, and create something special. We've had everything from Dulux. I've been there with the Dulux dog. We've had architects, town planners. We've had artificial turf manufacturers. We've had joinery contractors, M&E contractors. We've got a career zone where we've had, I think, probably had 20 organisations in there last year who were all providing apprenticeships, training, colleges, training providers, you name it, in there. So we're keen to grow that and have what we try and do is bring the students in, let them walk through an exhibition that they don't really realise, but it is sort of in a natural build progression. So when they first enter, they start talking with town planners, architects, surveyors and similar, and as they work their way through, they're going through groundworks and they're going into the superstructure, and as I say, towards the end they may come across artificial turf and landscaping. Then they enter the career zone, where they can talk about where are those next steps. What I've just seen in those 80 odd exhibitors that I've just been through has inspired me. what's my next steps? How can I get on an apprenticeship? How can I get into a full-time course or similar? So that's the career zone. And then on the way out, we have sort of the bigger exhibits, the plant and equipment and similar, and a few interactive displays there. So, it's open to everyone. I say it's held at Bishop Burton because they've been a massive partner of ours from Social Value perspective for many years. That's where our journey started, obviously. They're kind enough to lend us their huge indoor equine arena, which is great because it's actually got this specialist equine like sandy base. It's a little bit like walking on site, so we encourage people to turn up in your in your site shoes, and if you want to wear high vis, just to give that context. All this exhibition stands are created using Harris panels and pedestrian barriers. It's got that industrious feel to it. This isn't a clinical classroom environment. So I say it's open. Any schools and colleges, training providers in the region that want to talk to us about potentially exhibiting this year, please get in touch through the website. Likewise, anyone from the industry that wants to try and sell their corner of the market and show students the breadth and depth of what this great sector can offer, please get in touch.
I can't believe I've never heard of it.
I want to be there.
I want to be there. Yeah. We're definitely going to be there.
High vis.
Settle's going to be there.
Yes.
And I was now thinking, imagine we could set like a portable podcast up.
Yeah.
Could interview him as they're coming through.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. I mean, we have a lot of support. We have Mark Miller. Mark Miller from DIY SOS.
Oh, right.
He's our sort of he's our ambassador. Yeah. So he comes and sort of does all the comparing on the day. Goes around doing loads of interactive engagement and interviews.
Don't need our podcast then.
Yeah. No. Hey, collaboration's key. Collaboration's key. Yeah. This is what we're saying. There's a space there for everyone. We'd love to take that event to the next level. We've got a really, really good event and a good blueprint there, but we know there's so much more we could do. I mean, to be honest, we're physically probably maxed out the exhibitor space, but there's space outside. There's classrooms and conferencing facilities around there. CPDs is something we're looking at the moment, trying to co-locate CPD events. We just want to try and make that the most intense day of construction careers for all those 4 pillars I mentioned, and for industry. Let's not forget, it's a great industry networking event. You get 80 exhibitors in the room, a load of training providers, and then guests as well. You've got an industry event in its own right, irrespective of the careers. So, the more the merrier, and that's the genuine intent. It is the more the merrier. This isn't a commercial event. There's no costs involved. By all means, we're always looking for support and partners and similar, but this is an event that is put on for the good of the industry.
This is exactly why we made Behind the Chalkboard.
Yeah.
For this golden information.
Yes,
exactly. There's so much more out of the classroom. Any more questions?
No.
It's been amazing.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
It's been I think, do you know what? I was like, more than pleasantly surprised actually, because like I said, the interpretation, contractor sort of coming on, but it's just been chatting about things that are very vital in the situation that we're all in. It's great to have an insight from yourself, that you got your own challenges as a contractor trying to introduce new people into the industry. So but thank you. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, mate.
No problem. Thank you.
Cheers.